Hello everybody, my name is JebDev. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and today we're going to be talking about Borderlands 4, which was just recently announced and is having a release date window of sometime in 2025 for all new-gen consoles. Now first off, my main concern is going to be if there's going to be any movie or new Tales from the Borderlands involvement, because Borderlands 3 leaned into a lot of characters from Tales of the Borderlands. And since then, we had new Tales from the Borderlands, which was absolutely terrible. But we're probably going to see new Tales from the Borderlands characters get involved at some point in the game. Maybe. I'm not sure about the movie's involvement, considering the movie's kind of a weird state of canosity. But we might see at least a couple references to the movie. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about some things I want to see for Borderlands 4. Because we don't really know anything other than the fact that the game's coming. Starting off, number one, Pearlescent. Bring back the Pearlescent rarity. Having an extra rarity to hunt for at endgame adds on an extra bit of shelf life, and also, if made correctly, they can actually be really good. Some of the best weapons in the game, much like how they were in Borderlands 1. So, it wouldn't be that hard either, because in Borderlands 3, there's actually a secret rarity you can't obtain called Mythical Rarity, which is red. The only gun being Mythical Rarity is the Rockdov's Revenge, which is in the game files. So you have to use a save editor to get it. So we can honestly even just add a whole new rarity altogether. Or we could go ahead and reuse color beams. After all, we do that already in Borderlands 2. Bring back some other rarities. Bring back Effervescent rarity. But we need something higher than Legendary. We need something better to hunt for. The top of the class. And make it not from Tubbies or something, like dedicated endgame drops, much like how in Borderlands 3, there's Mayhem 4 exclusive drops and Mayhem 6 exclusive drops. There's drops. So, for example, the Tanksman Shield is a Mayhem 4 exclusive drop. Whatever Borderlands 4's endgame system could be, Pearlescence could be tied into that, where the higher you go, the more chance you have of Pearlescence, per se. So, let's say Pearlescence were in Borderlands 3, as you progress through the Mayhem difficulties, your chance would slightly go higher and higher, maybe maxing out at like a 10% chance to get Pearlescence. Probably not that high, but speaking of which, bring down the Legendary rarity. Make them rare again. Because the span we had between the pre-sequel and 3 was kind of jarring. You kind of got Legendaries frequently in the pre-sequel, but you know what I mean? In 2 in the pre-sequel, you hardly got anything, and the Legendaries you did get were the fucking worst ones possible. In 3, they were more common than white rarity weapons. Legendaries were more common than common. There was literally a video done where it's like, how easy is it to beat Borderlands 3 with only Legendaries or something, which just goes to prove how often they fucking drop. So, now, Wonderlands did try to remedy this by making Legendaries a little bit more rare. However, Wonderlands Legendaries were still common enough to see. I mean, considering the fact that in both playthroughs I did of Wonderlands, the first one I did when I pre-ordered the game and it came out, and the second one I did with crossplay with Zampact, the first Legendary I ever got was when you first fight the crabs, and it was the fucking Masterwork handbow, ironically enough. But beside the point, make Legendaries good again. Make them rare. Make them feel special so that when you open a chest and you see a Legendary, it's not like a, huh. It's like a, whoa, sort of thing. The next thing I want to talk about is the endgame system. Now, obviously, Borderlands has had a lot of different endgame systems. Borderlands 1 had it simple, a playthrough 2. There wasn't really much else beyond that point, though. Borderlands 2 had OP levels, which basically just increased the difficulty of everything and gave you slightly better drops. That's pretty much it. Which is kind of cool, because it's just a flat-out difficulty increase, no gimmicky modifiers or anything. Pre-sequel didn't have anything to that extent, as far as I'm aware, and obviously Borderlands 3 had the Mayhem system, which would go all the way up to Mayhem 10, which, in doing so, would have all sorts of modifiers, such as big head mode, enemies are resistant to certain elements, and then a Mayhem 11 mode, which is as hard as Mayhem 10, but without any of the modifiers, but the rewards were slashed in half. And then you have the Chaos levels in Wonderlands, which operate kind of similarly to Mayhem mode, but rather than modifiers occurring in-game, they would only occur in the Chaos Chamber, and outside the Chaos Chamber, enemies would act as if they were scaled to the OP level, so they would just get stronger and stronger. Personally, I think we could combine the Mayhem 11 stuff with maybe a little bit of the OP levels, right? So rather than just gimmicky modifiers and stuff, it's just like a flat difficulty that increases. But obviously, you know, as you progress through, we could also do what Wonderlands did, where as you progress through the Chaos levels, your chance of getting different legendary tiers goes up, which could obviously be a work-in for other rarities, such as Pearlescence and Effervescence and Mythicals, so to speak. So, as you progress through whatever endgame system the game has, your chance of getting these new rarities would go up and up. So say there's 5 out the gate. Around like Mayhem 2, that's when you have a chance of getting Pearlescence. Mayhem 3, you have a little higher of a chance, and then you can get like Effervescence. Mayhem 4, you have a higher chance of getting the previous 2, and then Mayhem 5, you have a even higher chance of getting the previous 2, but then like Mythicals. That's just an example, but I think what would also help is what I think most people probably want: scrapping the entire anoint system. For all those who don't know, in Borderlands 3, they added a system called the anointment system, where your guns could be anointed. For example, I think one of the old anointments was when airborne, your accuracy would increase by 75%. That's kind of a useless one. It was removed, but they would affect your abilities in all different ways, or your gameplay in all different ways. And the reason why so many people didn't like anointments is because you weren't actually using your guns to kill enemies, it was the anointment damage. And they did remedy this in Wonderlands by making the anointment take a backseat. Which I hope in Borderlands 4 they just chuck the system altogether, and that would obviously bring us to another mechanic, because every Borderlands game sort of has a gimmick mechanic. So, for example, with Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel, it had the weapon parts system, the system that we all know. Most of us prefer it over the anointments, most of us don't. I personally feel like the weapon parts system could take like a backseat role, so if you had like a gun, but the grip was wrong, it wouldn't be a make or break situation. So you could still have some leniency. Because another thing too is we're probably going to stick with the Borderlands 3 gun damage scaling. And, you know, guns not doing crazy amounts of damage like they could in 2. But then this also brings me to the next point of actual, like, gameplay loop. Because every game has sort of introduced something different. Borderlands 1 didn't really have much going for it. Borderlands 2 changed all the guns to what we know now and also added in the slag element. Pre-sequel added in lasers and the cryo element, and then Borderlands 3 added in tons of different firing modes for guns, and also added in the radiation element. Wonderlands also added dedicated melee and dark magic, but dark magic's definitely not returning in Borderlands 4. Which then leads us with what sort of new element could be added and how the gun's going to play differently than they did in 3. Are there going to be new mechanics? Are the guns going to be entirely reworked? I have no idea. We know nothing. But as for new element, there's not really much I could think of off the top of my head that hasn't kind of already been done, or would just be like a weird variation of what's already been done. I guess the closest thing I could think of to being able to use a new element is like plasma. Like a plasma element could kind of be cool. It could be like the DOT, or the dot, for all those who don't know, that's damage over time. That could be like a good element. And on top of that, I'm also worried about the Vault Hunters. What's the Vault Hunter situation going to be like? Who's the 4 Vault Hunters we're going to be playing as? And also the DLC. Because there's 2 different types of DLC that's happened. Number 1, you get DLC Vault Hunters. Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel had DLC Vault Hunters. Borderlands 2 had Gage and Krieg, and the pre-sequel had the Doppelganger and Aurelia. I prefer this system over what we had in Borderlands 3, which was the DLC skill tree, which is kind of cool, but I think the purple skill tree should be permanently worked into the gameplay loop. And Borderlands 4 just gives us DLC Vault Hunters, right? With their whole new skill trees and everything. That's personally what I think. Another thing that I hope for the DLC is they go back to what they did in Borderlands 2, which is the inclusion of, like, full-length DLCs. Not what Wonderlands did with the mirrors. And I know Borderlands 2 also had the Headhunter packs, but you know what I mean, like, actual full-story DLCs, like Sir Hammerlock's Big Game Hunt, Assault on Dragon Keep, Campaign of Carnage, so on and so forth. I hope for DLCs like that in Borderlands 4, that are fleshed out. I don't know why I donned a fake Irish accent when I said that. Another thing that I hope returns in Borderlands 4 as well is a lot of the stuff like dedicated melee, the ability to get rid of like that whole Guardian system as well, which was a system that you unlocked after beating the game that would allow you to basically do a modified version of the badass rank from Borderlands 2. It wasn't as powerful and game-breaking, and it capped out at a certain point. Which is kind of cool, but I think we should honestly pivot away from that. Another thing that I also think we should pivot away from is the Golden Chest. I think we should just scrap the Golden Chest. Use shift codes for Borderlands 4 for something different. I'm not sure what, but I think it's time the Golden Chest goes. The Golden Chest honestly feels kind of like a waste of space. Kind of feels like a waste of time. Especially considering a lot of the loot you get from the Golden Chest is kind of ass. It's not really a good method of farming anything. Or we can keep the Golden Chest and have it kind of work like the Vault Card Diamond Key system, where you could use gold keys to get an increased legendary drop rate or whatever, or have the cost be 25 Iridium or whatever currencies added into the game. I think they should do Iridium to help Iridium feel useful again. They should have that be a system, so you can open the gold chest at any point in time if you have a shift account or not. But if you do have a shift account, you can use gold keys to get increased chances of better loot. Or maybe even have a chance of getting exclusive shift gear, which would be like limited to purple rarity at best. Kind of like how in Borderlands 3 there's a Twitch exclusive gun, which I think most of us have forgotten about. But all in all, another thing I want to see, Iridium system get fixed. Iridium kind of became a joke in Borderlands 3. What with Iridium being reduced to buying nothing but cosmetics. Which I'm fine with, but I feel like the cosmetics should cost money and the Iridium should be towards important character upgrades. Maybe even getting to the point where you could, like, have the ability to craft your own gun, but you need Iridium to be able to do that. Not saying that should be added, but just as an example. And ultimately, we need a good story. Now here's what I think is going to happen. I think one of the big things they're going for is Ava is either going to be one of the leading characters in the game or is going to be the playable siren of the game. And I'm hoping they actually fix Ava, because one of the biggest gripes I have about Borderlands 3 is Ava's writing. No shit. Do I think Borderlands 3 is an abysmal game because of Ava alone? I joke about it, but no. But I also hope we get a good villain. We need a good villain. The Calypso twins were extremely fucking dated for their time. I believe Borderlands 3 was in development around the time dabbing was popular, which was years ago at this point, so the Calypso twins were incredibly outdated the moment the game came out, and also they had an angle where it looked like Troy was going to betray Tyrene, but that just never ended up happening for some reason, which makes me think that was like a last-minute thought. So, hopefully we get a brand new villain. We start off fresh, and we get a new corporate. Because typically speaking, in the Borderlands games, one of the corporations ends up going really bad. In Borderlands 1, it was Atlas, which led to them being shut down. In Borderlands 2, it was Hyperion. In Borderlands 3, or pre-sequel, you can make the argument that it was Dahl. Dahl was pretty much the big evil baddies. And in 3, it was the Bandits, COV. So, we can still deviate a lot with Borderlands 4, and I think one of the coolest things that we could do is either Vladof or Tediore. Tediore could do a thing where they're tired of being, the laughing stock, and they accrue some powerful relic and go on an evil rampage, Or it could be Vladof to do like a sort of pseudo-communism war sort of thing. That's just my opinion, but I think those two could work. Another thing that could work is Jacobs, because we saw in the Bounty of Blood DLC that Jacobs doesn't exactly have their hands really clean, especially also in Borderlands 1 with the Zombie Island of Dr. Ned DLC taking place in Jacobs Cove. So, Jacobs have very clearly gotten their hands dirty in the past, so we could also do Jacobs. Another thing we could also do is do, like, full-on Maliwan, because Maliwan were pretty evil in Borderlands 3, but Maliwan weren't the main players. But in Borderlands 4, after Katagawa died, it could be like a full-on Maliwan takeover. Once again, I think it would be cool if Vladof or Tediore were the main bad guys, but that's just my opinion. I'm open to hearing more. And finally, I want to close this video out by just saying once again, we don't know anything about Borderlands 4. All we know is it has a release date window of sometime in 2025, and that hopefully, with the bomb of the Borderlands movie, they're going to give at least 2% more of a damn. Now, what's going to happen in the Borderlands 4 game, I have literally no clue. The trailer didn't even show off any gameplay, it was just revealing the Psycho Mask and some, like, Iridian fingers, and it also looked like Elpis was getting involved, or like another moon or something, so we might be going back to Elpis or something. Which would be cool, because the only time you get to play on Elpis is the pre-sequel. And I hope that Borderlands 4 doesn't do the interplanetary hopping thing as much. Maybe limit it just to Pandora and Elpis, like going back and forth between the two. Because while it was cool to be able to go to other planets like Gehenna, Xylurgos, Eden 6, Necrotafeo, it kind of didn't really feel like it was that special, because you would constantly just be doing a big fetch quest between all of them. Whereas if it's just Pandora and Elpis you're going back and forth from, then you can really flesh out each one, make it feel better. But ultimately though, we're going to be waiting for more Borderlands 4 information, so keep your eyes peeled, and I'm interested to hear in the comment section below, if you are willing to do so, your potential ideas for the game, what you want to see, whether you agree with my points, whether you disagree with my points. I want to hear your thoughts on the game, and what you're expecting from it, if you think it might be okay, if you think it might be good, if you think it might be great, or if you think it'll be the absolute worst video game to disgrace the market since E.T. Probably not going to be that bad, but considering E.T. literally almost ended video games as a whole, but that's the point. I want to hear what you guys think as well. So thank you all for watching. If you're interested in seeing more, subscribe to the notification bell to get notified whenever I upload. It's free. You can change your mind later on whenever you want. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye!